Hello, everyone. Welcome to another beautiful session on automotive bug bounty programs and lessons learned. In the inaugural Pwn2Own Automotive event, an astonishing 49 unique zero-day vulnerabilities were uncovered, affecting various connected car systems and components from infotainment, dashboards to EV chargers. Today's session will explore most of common entry points, share details on some of those critical findings, and discuss how automotive industry should respond to such challenges. We have Carl Kali, principal cybersecurity expert at Week1, and he has an abundance of experience in cybersecurity with 25 years of experience, and uh, he's here to share his knowledge and address the cybersecurity threats experience. Please join me in welcoming Kali to our virtual stage. So
Thank
Kali,
you.
take your stage and proceed.
Thank you very much, Krishna. Krishna, you introduced me already, so I can save myself that part. And you also introduced the topic. So let me share my screen. So, so basically, like you said, this session is about the bug bounty program Pwn2Own that we ran at the start of the year. Um, I'm going to introduce very lightly what it is, then what the results were. I'm going to discuss the lessons learned from us because it was the first pure automotive one that we did. And I'm going to go through a sample attack flow that we've seen in the event. And finally, discuss why we're doing this and why also should you consider bug bounty, red teaming? What's the benefit in what's in it for you? So that's what I want to talk about this evening. It's a long day, and this presentation is not going to be vendor bashing, and it's also not going to be a product presentation. But I will quickly introduce three companies. Trend Micro, around since the late 80s, a giant in cybersecurity, only doing cybersecurity, nothing else. And I've worked with them for 20 years. Data center security, cloud security, infrastructure security, product security. And I've moved last year into Week1, a daughter of Trend Micro, which is the automotive arm at from Trend Micro, as you could say. And then also another daughter, or like a sister of ours, is the Zero Day Initiative. And the Zero Day Initiative is a bug bounty program, basically, or like a company where we can release um, vulnerabilities that have been identified. So I'm going to talk about this in a bit more detail in a second as well. But the we said, like, why don't we do something together? And instead of only running a Pwn2Own like project or um, event where we only look at hacking items, and then why don't we do it in the automotive? This happened in Tokyo in January this year, and CDI is around since 2005, so 20 around 20 years. And the idea of this is, if you're a security researcher and you identify a vulnerability, you could either sell it in the black market as such, but obviously we don't want that. So the CDI offers to buy this vulnerability of you. So you share with the CDI what you find. CDI will then put a value on it, like 500, 1,000, depending on how critical is the vulnerability, how common is it, how widespread is it, how easy is it to utilize this attack, what is the attack complexity. All those factors come into the calculation, and we make an offer to the researcher. The researcher then has the option to either accept this offer, and then the vulnerability belongs to the CDI, and the CDI then works together with the vendor to get this remediated and then also disclosed. And Pwn2Own events, they have been around for a similar time, 2007, twice a year, every year. And the idea here is, as the name suggests, you hack it, you own it. So you can take it home. So basically, in this case, if you hack a Tesla, it's yours. Um, it's In 2024, we had the first automotive only Pwn2Own. We had Tesla before as a sponsor, but here we had the Model 3. We also had some IVI system head units, Alpine, Sony. We had a couple of charging devices, operating systems. And what is maybe interesting to know is that the target products are typically selected without notifying the vendor ahead of this. So sometimes we partner up and then we do this together, but sometimes we just pick devices that are common in the market, do a bit of research on one of those, and then we select this as a target. And we then make very clear what the targets are. So, for example, you have to break in utilizing only Bluetooth, and the result has to be that you get kernel access. So that's kind of like the targets that are then laid out. We had 19 targets defined in those four categories, and we had also um, 3 days of event in January with 17 teams from 9 countries that submitted 51 entries to us. They basically described how they're planning to do it, and then we invited them to Japan so they can demonstrate this attack. And the results were, as Krishna already said, we discovered in those 3 days 49 unique 0 days and awarded over 1 million in prize money. And there was lots of funny outcomes. There, for example, on the left-hand side, you can see the NCC group. They had the head unit, so they could play Doom on it. And on the right-hand side, you see a researcher Rolling, and it was even on a camera that wasn't even enabled on the device to start with. So that was so couple of example outcomes from this event. And we saw the EV charger category was the most hit, so to say, followed by the IVI systems. And what is notable is that in the 3 days, we discovered more zero-day vulnerabilities relating to the automotive industry, which is more than in the entirety of the year 2023. Yeah, so the event was very successful. And our lessons learned from this. And I think the number one lesson learned here is that the number one vulnerability is still stack-based buffer overflows. And you think, like, really 2024, and we're still dealing with this. And we were a little bit hit by this, but kind of like, why does this still happen so much? Because in operating systems, typically this is less the cause. What we dug a little bit deeper down, and it's literally like in operating systems and software in IT, where security reporting and patching has been happening for years, like 20 years nearly now, that those type of vulnerabilities become more rare because the programs are aware of it, the tooling is aware of it, and there's lots of remediations in place and protection against this in place. So to talk about some of them. So in the operating system, you typically have ways to avoid this by address space layout randomization, so that you can't predict which part of which memory is when the software is running. You also have non-executable areas in the operating system, those kind of stuff. And we found that in some of the targets, this was actually present in the operating system, but not enabled. Or sometimes it wasn't even present in the operating system. So, like for example, real-time operating systems typically don't have those type of protections. Then we also see compiler features like canaries that would detect if the buffer is overrun. The canary is dead, so something has happened. So basically, kill yourself. Those compiler features are often not enabled. Of course, you can remediate a lot of this with using memory-safe program languages like Rust. And also, the developer of the software and the architect typically don't have this knowledge set or skill set. So this is kind of like maybe where IoT generally is far behind the IT industry. So we see this, for example, a lot in home routers. This kind of like it's very similar to it's like I found EV charging and home routers was very comparable um, from from a lot of perspectives. And what we're also dealing with a lot is leftovers, like debug interfaces, JTAG, that are fully accessible, certificates that shouldn't be in place anymore, like client certificates, but also useful tools. And useful tools, I'm going to talk about this in a little bit. It is tools that are unwanted on the device that could be utilized by a hacker, or if a researcher breaks into a device, the first thing they typically try to download is like download the tool set. But if you already provide them with the tool set, then of course you make it only just so much easier for them. And we also found, not only in Pwn2Own, but what we've also observed is that there's an industry-wide lack of product incident response readiness as such. So what we see a lot is buy to hide. So if you are a security researcher and report a vulnerability to a vendor, then in the automotive industry, we typically see that the vendor is denying that vulnerability, so it doesn't exist. It's kind of like head in the sand mentality, mental attitude for this one, or that they basically buy the vulnerability of the researcher, but then try to hide it. It's kind of like, so okay, this researcher found it, and no one else will ever find this. So it's kind of like as if the problem would go away. Disclosure avoidance we see a lot. So to give you an example, we've identified outside of Pwn2Own a vulnerability in a vehicle. We connected with the OEM. The OEM, after 90, 120 days, came back and said, look, we're not going to fix this. And then we dug a little bit deeper to find out who was the actual vendor of that ECU, and then connected with that vendor. And to be honest, we should have done that in the first place. So it's kind of like, but I'm still surprised by the fact that if we notify the OEM to say, look, there's a vulnerability, why do they not just connect them directly with the tier one that supplied that unit? So this is kind of like, and also we see it the other way around. Or before I go there, what we've also seen is that the vulnerability is notified, and the OEM fixes the vulnerability in a walkaround method without even notifying the tier one. So the tier one is not even aware that their device has a vulnerability. So there's absolutely no communication between the tiers. And once we submitted this to the tier one, the reaction there was very similar. So kind of like, yeah, can we not try and make this go away, or avoid talking about this? There's absolutely no multi-vendor disclosure process in place. So this is what we're dealing with in the automotive industry, it seems. And what I would like to present is also an attack flow that was mentioned twice at least today already. And this was kind of like on the Pwn2Own events. There was, of course, 49 different vulnerabilities that we've seen. But I want to discuss a specific one from Sector 7. If you simply Google for Pwn2Own Sector 7, they have a blog of exactly what they're doing is. And I want to dissect this a little bit. So basically, the first thing that happened was it was an EV charger. And the research team, they looked at they simply Googled around, and they found already research in 2018, 5 years ago, where some issues were documented, but also the JTAG pinout was already there in place, which saved the research team a lot of time. And the original researcher, when they were looking at the device to gain access or root level access to it, what the researcher did was did an entire firmware dump through JTAG, and then disassembled this, figured out where was the password verification, patched it in such a way that whatever password you put in, it's always comes out good, and then uploaded that firmware back into the device. The researchers, they've chosen an alternative way. They simply disabled auto boot and gained single user mode this way. So that was the initial attack vector. And the comment was a little bit shocking from the researchers, that they said the hardest part was actually acquiring this device, to purchase it, to get hands on it. Then it carried on. They detected the first vulnerability, and it was a command injection in the Wi-Fi password field. What that means is literally um, it was programmed in such a way that it accepted like whatever you put in as a password and would run commands against it, but it wasn't doing any verification, any syntax verification of this, syntax validation on this, input validation. So what happened is you could add a command to the end of your password and it would run it. And then on top of that is on the device there was an instance of Netcat already pre-installed, which is also dubbed as the Swiss Army knife for hackers. So basically, when you want to access a system remotely with a remote shell, this is the first go-to tool that you would utilize, or create reverse proxies, this kind of type. So they combined those two findings and basically sent a Bluetooth packet with a new Wi-Fi configuration. But I said, okay, this is the new password here. Basically, run Netcat, listen on port 1337. You recognize this as lead, typically used by researchers and hackers. And when someone is connecting to it, then please execute bin shell. Yeah, and then ignore whatever is after that. So this way, you send a single packet, and what you get with this single packet is root shell. So that was the first vulnerability. And they already had a notion that they weren't the only ones finding this. It seems to be a very common exploit. So they also mentioned that from from 7 of the entries, 5 had this exact same bug. So it's very easy to find, it seems, if you are experienced researcher. Then they said, okay, look, we have to dig deeper so we can see something else, because they were pretty late in the competition. So they said, let's look at the cloud communication. And they looked and they found, first of all, that there was server certificates verification was not enabled. Um, curl is very, very vague on how you do this, so it might have been actual misconfiguration, so it might not have been on purpose, especially since the server actually did have a good certificate. And the certificate was stored in the file system, so this enabled them to run man-in-the-middle attacks. So any command that comes to the server from the client to the server on the other direction, they can listen in, and of course also inject commands. From there, they went and said, they looked at the message handling, and it was OCPP. And there was a discussion earlier about exploiting EV charging networks. It was from SciFlow, and there was a very good comment on like a shadow channel that is typically used by the vendors. And but in this communication, um, they were able to change some of the commands to modify them in such a way that they could execute local commands. So they were able to create a Netcat listener and reboot as a command. So now they had a full entire kill chain. You could go with like your piece of code on your phone. You could walk up to a EV charger, send a single packet that would reconfigure the Wi-Fi to make it connect to your own network. Then you intercept the cloud communication because you already have the certificate, and you issue this bsh command to run Netcat and reboot. And you simply wait for the device reboot and you have a root shell. You can do this to any of the devices of that vendor. And that's already pretty bad as it is. But you would think, okay, what's the worst case scenario here? Like, it's kind of like, okay, I can walk up to a device and maybe change some of the configuration. But I think in the earlier discussion today, it becomes very clear, like, is there maybe a way where you can interfere with the charging power or settings to basically cause grid failures, this kind of stuff? And the researchers, they kept digging further, and it gets worse. And what they found, that there was this exact OCPP back channel from the vendor. We've seen this earlier in the presentation. I've made a comment. I changed my slides quickly here to make a point back to the conversation. And the researchers also assume that this is used as a SSH service, so that the vendor can connect to the charging devices one by one to do remote support, to change configuration, to pull logs, this kind of thing. And they managed to use this as a reverse connection, and they managed to, from the charger, to connect back to the mothership. So basically to the device that was initiating those connections. And they identified that this device was running on AWS, and with a simple call command to through these reverse proxies to check on the metadata for AWS for the security metadata, they identified the access key ID and the secret access key of this device, which of course is the same as or often the same as used elsewhere. So they checked what can we actually see if we use those credentials against AWS, and they identified hundreds of S3 buckets, file storage buckets. So it is fair to assume that the researchers, if they really wanted, they could have taken over at least in partial the entire or the entirety of the vendor's cloud infrastructure, depending on how segmented it is. And they also identified that from this mothership, in theory, it should be possible to connect all of the other devices. So this nightmare scenario, you could say you could take over the entirety of the cloud infra, but from one single um, charger, you could potentially connect to all of the other chargers. So again, you're talking about grid failure, terrorism, this kind of stuff. So um, I think it's a really good case, and I think there's a lot to be studied about. It's kind of like, look, there is command injection. What are the root causes? It's kind of like input sanitation. There is tools left over, like I said earlier. Those kind of things. So it's basically, I I I I would say anyone read through the blog is like there's lots to be learned about it. So the good question is now why, and why you could ask, are we doing this, and why should you be doing this? So like, let me answer why we are doing this. So basically, we want to push the entirety of the industry. So Zero Day Initiative, what they're doing for 20 years already, is kind of like pushing the industry to release more secure products. And we observe, of course, like, are getting products more security mature or not. But for us, it's also very important to learn new tactics, tools, procedures, techniques on how researchers, hackers work. Like, what are they using? How are they gaining entry? And of course, we productize this. This is probably no secret. Um, and then there is the other way around. Why should you be doing this? And if I ask anyone, why should you be doing red teaming? Why should you be doing um, bug bounty programs? The number one answer, and the only answer typically, is to measure the maturity of your product. So basically, to see, is your product actually um, good on a security posture? But what I never hear is, and I think this is probably a more important reason, is so you can measure and train your PSOPs team. So imagine this: you do a bug bounty program, and like, for example, Skoda, they have only released one like maybe a month ago. They have released a tool, like an app for a mobile phone, so you can interact with the vehicles. And they said, look, there's a bug bounty program, official, anyone can take part. If you find a vulnerability, this is the remuneration, this is the money that we're going to offer for which type of finding that you have. Our response times are 3 days. We have a fix out in, let's say, 2 weeks. If you, as a researcher, verify our fix, we give you an extra uh, numeration, like it gives you extra plenty for that. So this kind of like you also lay out, of course, um, your rules and regulations, your rules of engagement. So it's basically say, okay, this is the target, but like any escalation into our cloud infrastructure, stop it, don't go there. So basically, when you do this, you will get a set of vulnerabilities reported. But how does your product security incident response team act to that? Can they understand what is reported? Can they act on it? Can they fix it? Can they patch it? Can they push out patches to their own products without bringing the entirety of the product suite down? So if you look at Microsoft as an example, every month they release product patches, security patches, but typically it's not the whole world doesn't die in a blue screen. It's typically third party that would cause it. Um, but you could very well measure like how fast and good is your piece of team acting on this. And then of course, like once you identify a vulnerability, even by reading those blogs or even when someone submits something to you, the first thing you need to do, of course, is feed this back into your Tara. So then this gets to work in your DevSecOps lifecycle, where you then say, okay, look, um, you create your product, you verify during the creation, during the development phase, where you say, okay, I do SAST, then go to pre-production release. And then here is the concept. Once you do the detection, you adjust your monitoring. But if someone feeds back any bugs, vulnerabilities, anything of that kind, then of course you have to feed this back into the left-hand side again. This is what the Tara is for, in my opinion, is so you don't make the same mistake twice. Um, so that's kind of like what I'm thinking. Why this is something that you should think about is bug bounty programs. Of course, there's lots of bug bounty uh, programs that you can run with. You can do your own, but at least red teaming, like internally. And I'd say many of you do this probably already. But this would be my argumentation here. So I think that concludes my presentation. I didn't check my timing, so I hope that was okay. So let me stop my sharing.
Good, good presentation, Kalish. Yeah, you're right on time, and that's good. Yeah, the bug bounty programs are really like it's not. It not only creates awareness, but also if a white hat person finds out the bug vulnerabilities rather than a black hat, it's
Mm.
an
Yeah,
attacker.
absolutely.
It's very much beneficial.
Yeah. And also, if there's a bug bounty released, if it's like, look, this is a product, and you invite security researchers to get really excited about this. So finally, I can put my hands on this legally.
Legally, yes, that's
Yeah,
the
mm,
keyword here. So yes.
yeah, absolutely.
So thank you for the presentation. And looks like we have a couple of questions and
Oh, okay.
going on the order or the upvotes that are received. Mm, Okay. So first question is, have all the BLE attacks been closed in the new versions after the BLE version 6?
I I can't say to be honest. I haven't tracked this, and unfortunately, I even have to say that some of the vulnerabilities that we've seen in January in Pwn2Own um, have not been remediated or mitigated yet. This is kind of like, so sometimes it moves a lot slower than you would think. Yeah, it's like it's
It takes time to
yeah, yeah,
fix.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and also compatibility checks is a bigger issue. So if you fix something, might break some other thing. So
Yeah. There's also what I often find is kind of like when you get involved in bug bounty program, I think you also need to get your legal team and marketing on the side, because often the PSOC team, they would say yes, absolutely, let's do this. Then you start planning, and then like the moment you then start getting together with the bug bounty program, then your marketing department says, oh God, no, like there is this kind of like, what if someone hears
vulnerability.
a vulnerability, exactly. And this, it's kind of like I look at it the other way around. I look at it like, if I see someone patching constantly security vulnerabilities, then I'd say like they're really on the ball here, because like they have a very fast moving PSOC team, and I think it's something good that you can kind of like even advertise. But marketing department will not see it that way. They only see the highlight. But to be honest, it's a lot better. You like someone reports that you had a vulnerability that has been fixed, um, like rather than having issues kind of like that you read reports about 12-year-olds driving around in your cars. It's kind of like, yeah, and
Yep.
them with like a USB cable. So that's the underside of the other side of the coin.
Right. Okay. So I'll go to the next question. So the next question is like we consider to launch bug bounty program. However, we would like to start only an internal one. We didn't find any sources on that books. Or do you have any experience in that regard? Any suggestions?
Okay, I don't have any books, citations, practices, but I think one thing that you can think about is red teaming. There's lots of resources on the internet about red teaming. Also, kind of like how you could do it. If you're looking at internal bug bounty, it becomes a hell of a lot easier because of all the legal issues with this one. Um, I think the most important thing that you have to have is a rules of engagement that you say, look, this is the target, and do not go any further than this. It's like and also the targets that you announce. This is kind of like where you typically do the remuneration. So if you achieve this, you get that. You could even do it. You can start very simple that you say like any bug that you find, we'll give you a certain amount of money. So for example, like a bug is that amount of money, a security issue that one, like critical security issue, you can raise it this one. Um, but I can like if you're really interested in that, just contact me, and I can also put you together with the CDI. We can give you kind of some material of how we set them up, and you can do the same thing pretty much internally.
Sounds good. So maybe if you can put your email or contact information in the chat or somewhere, Kali.
Hmm.
So if anyone wants to reach out to you, then yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, the contact
Thank
information
you.
or LinkedIn. It's like if you look Kali Big One, you'll find me.
Okay,
There is one
great.
more here about stack base before number one exploited, but still,
Yeah, so we have a couple of questions.
unfortunately, yeah, it's still the number in what we've seen. It's still the number one stack base overflow.
Yeah. So don't you think more dynamic analysis tools make sense for Linux tools like address space, layout randomization,
Yes, absolutely.
non-executable, and others? Yeah.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. Because that those are designed to avoid stack-based buffer overflows. It's kind of like a cat and mouse the whole time. It's kind of like you put a block into place, they find around it and block and around it. But this is the way. It's like if you do not have any address-based layout randomization or canaries or anything like no SAST in place, then it's just way too easy for any researcher.
Right. Yep. hmm The other question that we have, do you think optimization levels are avoiding basic Linux kernel, HAL, and others?
You think optimization layers? That I wouldn't know because like I'm not deep into that matter. Like for this one, I wouldn't have too much expertise on this.
No worries.
Sorry about that.
Not a problem. And then the last question is, how is your Cal rating for your team?
What's Kyle rating?
I think he's referring to the ISO uh, cybersecurity assurance level. If I get you right, Naresh, from ISO 21434.
Oh, okay, okay, okay. It's like when I worked in Trend Micro 20 years in cybersecurity, there was there was no ISO 21434. Yeah, so
Okay.
and still isn't.
No worries. Okay, I think that's the end of questions. Any other questions? Okay, looks like I think everyone is good on their questions. So thank you very much, Kali.
It's
And
really nice to see all the icons popping up there. That's
yeah,
nice.
so they're all happy and like yeah, the presentation is very well like consumed. So
Thank you.
yes,
Thank you very much.
thank you very much, Kali.
Have
Thank you very much
okay,
for all
good
the audience.
evening, good night, everyone.
Yeah, good night and good evening, everyone. Take care. Bye bye.